AI as a tool to AI as an intervention.
Just because you deployed it clinically does not mean clinicians are going to use it.
Those are keys to learning health systems. Those are keys to AI governance.
Welcome for our AI-based Learning Health System webinar. I have three prestigious guests with us today, Dr. Paul Nagy, Dr. Don Brown, and Dr. Parsa Mirhaji. Dr. Paul Nagy is chair of the Biomedical Informatics and Data Science in the School of Medicine at Johns Hopkins University. He oversees 80 faculty and 70 graduate students with over 50 million in research contracts. He chairs the EMEA Academic Forum, which represents 90 academic programs, and has spent the last 25 years inside academic medical centers helping lead change by combining behavioral sciences with information technology and data sciences. He's the co-director of RAISE, of the RAISE Center, Responsible AI and Information Sciences, with the purpose of empowering learning health systems through data. He's received the Odyssey Titan Award, OHDSI Titan Award, and SIMS Imaging Informatics Lifetime Achievement Award, among others. Next up, we have Dr. Don Brown, who is the Senior Associate Dean for Research and the William S. Calcott Professor at UVA's School of Data Science and Department of Systems and Information Engineering. He founded the UVA Data Science Institute, co-directs the Translational Health Institute of Virginia, and serves on the board of the Artificial Intelligence Industry Innovation Coalition, or AI3C, which guides national policy on healthcare AI. He's a West Point grad and former U.S. Army officer with a PH.D. in engineering systems from the University of Michigan. His 30-plus year career has focused on data fusion, knowledge discovery, and simulation optimization with applications in healthcare, defense, and public safety. Since 1989, he's led public and private sector data science efforts as president of Commonwealth Computer Research, Inc. His honors include the Norbert Wiener Award and the IEEE Millennium Medal, and multiple teaching honors. And finally, we have Dr. Parsa Mirhaji, MD, PhD, Doctor, who is the director of the Montefiore Einstein Center for Health Data Innovation and professor of genetics at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. He was involved in the NIH NCATS Clinical Translational Science Award, CTSA program, since its inception in 2006. Currently directs the Health Informatics and Data Science Core at the Institute for Clinical and Translational Sciences, ICTR, at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Parsa has contributed to the creation of the PICORNet as co-PI of the NYC Insight Network and served as CTO of the New York Clinical Data Research Network, spearheading open science and large-scale clinical research across multiple NYC-based, New York City-based institutions. Before that, Parsa was the director of the Center for Biosecurity and Public Health Preparedness at the University of Texas, where he built Houston's post-9/11 biosurveillance network, earning the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Best Practice Award in Public Health. Parsa was born in Iran, graduated as an MD from Tehran University of Medical Sciences, and received a PhD in Health Informatics from UT Boston. Parsa is an inventor and has received multiple patents covering semantic integration, big data, and natural language clinical text understanding. He directed the design and implementation of the AI-driven learning health system platform at Montefiore, which powers real-time analytics and learning across the care continuum at Montefiore Health System. And in the interest of full disclosure, my name is James Green. I'm the CEO of Cognome. We have a learning health system platform, and our learning health system platform is the manifestation of Parsa's work, both at the Montefiore Einstein and the University of Texas. But enough of hearing from me. Parsa, perhaps you could kick us off by talking about what is a learning health system?
Yes, thank you very much for the nice introduction and inviting me for this. I appreciate the opportunity. From my perspective, learning health system is essentially an ecosystem within health systems comprised of science, informatics, incentive, and cultural interventions that are strategically aligned to enable systematic learning from every patient experience and transforming learning routine care delivery processes to continuous evidence generation, adaptation of new interventions, and improvement cycles. In learning health system, the gap between knowledge generation and knowledge application continuously approaches zero, and it is basically built on a dual value principle. that every patient interaction and experience represents both an opportunity to deliver care and an opportunity to learn and contribute to the knowledge base, system knowledge of the care delivery. This dual purpose requires infrastructure, requires both social intervention as well as technological and organizational and cultural interventions and infrastructure, and creating incentives for stakeholders to support these dual action and integrate them within a complex environment. That's where probably the role for AI comes to the picture, where AI capacity to accelerate learning velocity can be used to transform months-long research opportunities to continuous cycles of learning and adaptation in healthcare settings. So if I want to now combine these two takes on what is a learning health system and how AI contributes to that, one can imagine an AI-enabled learning health system where all of the knowledge, evidence, validation that are generated within a learning health system can be encoded through computational models that can be not only deployed at scale, but also shared, become a medium for collaboration across health system and a way of disseminating the knowledge across multiple health systems at scale.
Excellent. So thank you for the definition. Now, sort of let's dig into the meat of the question. Donna, I'd like to go to you, and with our first sort of big question. There's a lot of pressure today in the space that we work in healthcare and in research institutions in particular. Really, what's keeping you up at night? And given the funding cuts and the economic pressure, what do you see as the top existential challenges for clinical researchers and academic health systems, and how are you navigating them?
I guess I'll say that what I see or what I feel in terms of the things that are keeping me up. Clearly, what you said, James, the idea of the cuts that we're seeing right now to research, the ongoing, I would say, lack of support for science right now. It's really taking its toll on a lot of us. I mean, if I look at the data that I'm seeing in the reports right now, they're saying that the administration has proposed up to a 43% cut in fiscal year 26 in NIH funding for specifically grants, and that's about $18 to $20 billion less in annual funding. That would dramatically reduce the number of new grants, cut support for ongoing research, and decrease the funding for the next generation of science. So it's a really major thing. They've also actually canceled a number of grants. 2,100 grants right now worth $9.5 billion have been canceled by NIH, according to NIH scientists. So this is a massive, massive change in what we're seeing right now in terms of support for research, particularly scientific research at the cutting edge of what we want to do. And while some legal challenges, I think, have blocked the most severe measures, we are all alarmed at the scale and potential long-term consequences of these policies. And I think that that's what's really, really affecting most of us. I would say for me personally, I'm really alarmed by the lack of support that we're seeing from the public and from Congress for science. I mean, I'll speak personally, since I was a child, science has always been one of those areas that has been strongly supported by a number of folks in the population writ large and by Congress broadly across whatever political party you were in. But right now we're seeing that that's not happening. And, this is something that I don't understand, because science is the foundation for what we think of as improvement to society, eradication of disease, suffering, improved living standards. It's all at the foundation of it. So I think what we need as scientists to do is to think about how we are communicating and educating people about the importance of science and scientific research. At UVA, we are absolutely working to try and make sure that we are getting the word out. But I think this is a long-term process that we need to engage in. We've got to start communicating better, and we have to make sure that we are, in fact, engaging with politicians, with the public, and making sure they understand the importance of scientific research. At UVA, we're working with our AAU partners, our APLU partners, to inform congressional members about the costs of what they're doing to science and the costs, what it really takes. And what Parsa just said about the infrastructure for learning health systems, there's a cost to that. And we need to inform everybody about what those costs are and where we as a country need to be in terms of supporting it. And we are absolutely working to try and do those kinds of things. Now, I will say, not to end this on a negative note, but on a more long-term perspective, our university has been around for over 200 years. We've been through hard times before. We're going to go through these times and we will come out of it. But we need to be creative and thoughtful about how we do it and getting the message out to the public and to Congress.
Paul, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Thank you for having me here. It's really a privilege. I have no conflicts, and Don is truly talking about, we're seeing a lot of uncertainty. We see a lot of things in the news about some research being canceled or being put on hold or being paused by a judge. But I wanted to share that it's already had an immediate effect. And so Learning Health System at its heart is combining our research mission with our clinical mission and trying to really harness them together. And so when the research mission falters, it has a direct impact on that cycle with Learning Health Systems. And so I chair the academic forum at AMIA, where we represent 90 different academic medical programs in biomedical informatics. Biomedical informatics is a very applied field where we train information scientists and data science how to lead and transform healthcare systems. And I can tell you that mid-cycle for us is usually December through February. And so with the new administration in January, within weeks of the new administration, we saw a lot of notifications for declining in federal research awards, as Don mentioned. We also saw a proposed cap on indirect rates, which funds a lot of infrastructure. This actually had an immediate impact. So within last year, what we saw a real drop in the number of PhD programs. So immediately, several programs started reducing the number of slots that they had. We saw the University of Pittsburgh canceled all of their PhD programs, even when offers been made to PhD students, they were rescinded. And we had, at Hopkins, we had to really justify to our administration that not only could we support the PhD student, but we could support the PhD student even if we lost the funding that we had justified for that PhD student. So we have to go through a lot more bridges around it to hold on to our students. So it wasn't just our PhD programs. So our PhD cycle is usually December through February in the US. Our master's program is usually February through April in the US. And what we saw was through the revoking on withholding of visas for international students, we saw that having a direct impact on both our baccalaureate and our master's programs. About half of graduate STEM students come from India and China. And so we saw a significant drop this year in the number of applicants, the number of international students that are accepting offers to our master's program, which also helps fund this whole cycle. And so and then on top of that, we are seeing proposed cuts in Medicaid that Don mentioned. And those would have a direct impact on our clinical informatics fellowships, where we actually train future CMIOs to help lead that change. So I went to the Association of Clinical Translational Research, looking to commiserate in April at the conference. And what I found was that we were actually relatively lucky compared to bench-side research. And a lot of bench-side research was actually really hammered hard with the drop in grants. And so we saw whole programs cancel throughout the country where they've actually had to dismiss students in their second and third year of their PhD program. So after they've already been going halfway through their cycle, they've seen whole labs having to lose their funding and having to release all of their students. So we're certainly seeing, even now, this has already made a big impact on our education, which is our future pipeline for scientists in our field, especially covering clinical research, both from the bench side to the bedside. And so we're certainly seeing this as certainly a changing event in how to retool and rechange our PhDs and our students so that they also might not be looking at the same way as an academic career to see what sort of training they were going to be having here in the US.
So as Don said, all of your institutions, Johns Hopkins, UVA, Montefiore, Einstein, have been around for a long time, 100 plus years, each of you. So you will survive it. So these things equal change. So Parsa, talk to us about what's changing.
Well, I think you guys clearly covered all of the external forces and how it is impacting the research internally. Right now, we see that in the hospitals, with the external sources of funding disappearing or reducing, people are chasing grants and and research that are not directly aligned and matched with the institutional priorities. CEOs and the administration is asking for projects that have clear value and ROI, which leaves a lot of the basic science research and preclinical research, as Paul mentioned, behind. And researchers are confused because of this misalignment between the research interest and discovery and direct applications to the healthcare. So people are looking for new models of both financial and research models. I would say that there are two major trends that I'm seeing internally happening in different organizations to address some of these change in the funding streams. One is the research integration, as Paul mentioned, combining and integrating our research mandate with our clinical care, which is essentially the essence of learning health system, and trying to create efficiencies, especially by adopting technologies such as AI, for example, that allows larger scale processing of EHR data, creating more scalable and generalizable analytic models, natural language processing, trial recruitment processes, and federated, distributed analytics that not only scales research, but also creates more applied evidence for consumption within the context of a real world health system. Which brings us to the potentials to really see this as a model for future, breaking the silos of evidence generation, the slow pace of evidence generation that has been a barrier for discovery, barrier for healthcare transformation by creating these knowledge networks. There are examples of these knowledge networks. Odyssey is a very good example of networks of knowledge generation that people are deploying. During COVID, they actually created a success story on how fast and how reliably they can create unbiased evidence for some of the new.
And I'll just interject that Odyssey, spelled OHDSI, is the observational health data sciences and informatics community that helps facilitate. It's an open source community that helps facilitate real world evidence research. Just for those of you that don't know, please
And
continue.
James, I'd like to
Parsa.
mention
Yeah.
also that,
Yeah.
I think we have seen many crises over the past couple hundred years.
Yes.
And I agree that we have weathered all these crises. However, I also want to point out that we've never had the crisis on all three fronts. So we're seeing we're seeing a real attack on research. We're seeing the loss through immigration, the loss of international students. We're seeing a real attack on education. And now we're going to see also looking at a potential real catastrophic drop in funding for healthcare. So all three of them combined really puts the challenge on a learning health system. And I think this underlines Don's point, is that we've never seen this level of a challenge on science before. And that's the real challenge today, is how do we address this underlying threat to actually to perform science in healthcare?
Yeah. No, I think that's completely fair.
Yeah, and one way to think about it is, perhaps, if I have just 1 minute to close this, which is I don't think that any health system will be able to solve these problems on their own. And maybe we should come together as learning health systems that are connected, creating these system of systems approach to knowledge generation, evidence generation, and validation that can combine evidence, practices, and validation across multiple health systems. That's probably one way to address the mounting challenge that Paul and Don mentioned. And all of them are somehow unique. We haven't really seen this scale of what you call attack to the learning health systems.
Let's move on to the next question, which is, how is generative AI impacting clinical research and academic health systems?
Well, so I'm going to give you a couple of areas. I'm going to talk about discovery, I'm going to talk about understanding and visualization, and I'm going to talk about links to clinical practice and treatment management. These are some areas just to give you a sense of what's going on. And I'm going to do this through examples. So for example, for generative AI for discovery, one of the things that we're using it for, as an example, is in these areas of measuring physiological change due to aging. And we can do this by looking at cardiopulmonary exercise testing and the results for both males and females. And we can look at it across the generations to see what's happening. Now, traditionally, The kinetics of physiological response to exercise have been characterized by a series of differential equations. But what we're finding is that we can get more accurate predictions of outcomes when we apply generative AI techniques, particularly transformers, to build these models up. And these things can provide more accurate predictions of the current state. They can provide more accurate predictions of future states in the process, in these multiple time series processes. These approaches, therefore, can provide a real strong baseline for early detection of disease, treatment plans for across the board for cardiac, pulmonary, and musculoskeletal interventions. So that's one, discovery. Number two, this one is the surprising one, I think, because I'm going to argue that they can support visualization and understanding. They are black boxes. There's absolutely no question about it. But in this example I'm giving you of these multiple time series, those things are incredibly hard for not only for clinicians to understand, but they're hard for experts in the field to understand, to be able to interpret what's going on in those multiple time series. What we found is that by using the capability of these generative AI techniques to compress from high dimensions down into a series of low dimensional displays, we can show and give people a better understanding of what's going on in the physiological change that occurs as a result, again, of this exposure to exercise. So we can see it again, visually, we can see what's happening in a much more effective way. The third area I'll say is clinical practice. And in clinical practice, we think that the best way to do this is by using, I'll say implementation science, ways that we can implement through collaborations of clinicians, data scientists, and experts that allow us to bring together these capabilities to support real, honest-to-goodness, effective improvements to clinical practice. It's I'll say a human-centered, holistic, evidence-based approach that tries to deliver real transformation of the generative AI model into a clinical practice setting. And the final thing I'll mention is for clinical care or treatment options. And we've used generative AI, and this example I think is really sweet, because what it tells you is that we can use these generative AI techniques in ways that really leverage what we know but aren't able to effectively communicate to a lot of the folks who are taking care of folks. For example, in dementia and Alzheimer's, we've created generative AI approaches that provide caregivers with the kind of information that they need in order to support their loved ones as they go through these diseases. And caregivers, particularly those who are new to the role, they're involved. They experience significant emotional and mental stress. They can't find the services that they need. They can't access the kind of support that they need. But by creating a generative AI approach that gives them quick 24/7 access to support that they can get, we've found that we've been able to really support these caregivers in giving the kind of support they need to their loved ones. And this kind of thing it's really reducing the burden through these conversational agent approaches that would otherwise not be available to support these sort of caregivers and the treatment plans that have been devised. So these are some examples of the kinds of things that we can do with generative AI. There's a lot more that we can do. I'd say that what I'm trying to tell you is that these things are absolutely making an impact on healthcare right now. I hope that what I've told you is giving you a sense of what is currently possible. And I hope that it's also giving you a motivation to discover, because there's a lot of other things that are possible and a lot of other things that are going on. And I think Parsa would like now to give you another set of examples in this area.
Yeah, before you go, Parsa, it's an amazing juxtaposition of the terribly hard situation we find ourselves in terms of funding, and the incredible opportunities we have in AI. It's a very unusual combination of circumstances. All those things you showed us are just incredible. Just huge improvements and changes in the way that we conduct care. But Parsa, yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the good news is that right now it appears that at least current funding levels continue to support AI. That's the one area you can almost guarantee that if you include AI in your proposal, it's going to be considered. On the other hand, I think that we need more than that. I think we need real honest to goodness support across the board for a lot of work that we're doing.
Yeah, AI can only work with what we've discovered. So if we're not discovering
Correct.
new things, it's not going to be as good. So, Parsa, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Before I talk, Paul, do you have anything you want to add? Because you may have.
I did. I appreciate that. So I think Gen AI is a game changer on the research side. It's been very exciting to see. I'd say in two big areas, of course. One of the key things is a lot of our data is in unstructured notes. And so a lot of data is really sitting there in clinical notes that are still very difficult to extract. And so using Gen AI as a tool for name density recognition, for negation detection is actually very, very powerful. Gen AI is really going to help lower the barrier of technical access. So it allows clinical researchers not have to become coders or SQL experts. And so what I think has been really powerful has been the ability to have Gen AI. It does a great job of taking human language and turning it into a queryable question that I can then run on a database or create a model around. So I've been very happy and excited to see Gen AI perform the task of taking a human language and turning it into good cohort discovery questions, turning it into good, helping them with study design, helping them actually do some of the diagnostics and be able to actually do some of the data analysis. And as Don mentioned, I feel like it's actually done a good job with analysis. So I feel like it is a big, huge aid for any clinical researcher who wants to use data science and large data repositories to be able to use a tool like Gen AI.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Parsa,
go ahead. I was just going to say, because my name was invoked, I'm going to give two examples of how we use Gen AI in a larger ecosystem here at Montefiore. One is just streamlining and enabling large-scale research by using clinical notes, as Paul mentioned. Use large language models to smartly and contextually de-identify and remove PHI from notes and provide those notes for research, but by redacting unnecessary information in a way that it aligns with the IRB and the purpose of the research projects on the fly, which is a game changer by allowing us to bring every note and all of the documentation of the care that we have and provide them for researchers in a privacy-preserving manner within a very compliant and auditable framework, which was just completely impossible given how many diverse sets of documentation practices and documentation types we have in the healthcare system. Second example, which is again not only game changer for us as practitioners and researchers, but also for the patients in terms of providing them opportunities to participate in research, is clinical trial matching. Using generative AI and large language models that can really understand the essence of a clinical trial as it is described in the clinical trial criteria, and looking into the wholesome evidence that exists in the EMR, including of the pathology notes, radiology notes, all of the histories of the patient's experiences within the healthcare system to find the beneficial clinical trials for specific patients, especially in cancer care, which is sometimes life-changing and life-saving for patients. And we've never been able to do it in this scale in a precise and precision and patient-centered way.
Paul, if we go back to thinking about a learning health system, it's really about taking a learning and then reapplying it as an input and learning from it and doing that sort of circular thing. And a core component of that is taking learnings from research and applying them in actual clinical care. What strategies have you seen successfully bridge insights with clinical decision-making that deliver real value?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I think that's usually the last mile that can be often the longest. If you've taken your clinical data into a research enclave, you've built a really exciting predictive model that is actionable, and you want to bring that back into clinical care, this is usually difficult to do. So I actually have a slide for this that I wanted to share to see, kind of present what some of the challenges are when you're trying to do this. And so when I think of a learning health system, I think of basically a quadrant. And I think of on the right-hand side is where we deliver care, and on the left side we research care. Now, interestingly, they both have very different business models. Research is about grants and publications. Clinical care is really about delivering clinical outcomes and clinical revenue. And then when you talk about change, we really want to look at it from a cultural perspective and a technology perspective. And research side, we have certainly had to do with IRB and understanding where the data is coming from. But then we look for compute environments that do data integration that help us build these great models. When we try to bring those models back into clinical care, we have two major challenges. One, of course, is the technology itself, and that is really often what we see is we often have to refactor a lot of these advanced models to simpler models so they're more explainable. The other challenge we have, especially with Gen AI and some of the deep learning models, is that they're very dependent upon the data they were trained with. If the data they were trained on is not heterogeneous, it might really lead to a lot of drifting. And so we call the deep learning and the Gen AI models that we bring into clinical care, we call that the high interest credit card of technical debt, because they are very susceptible to drift and change and undesirable outcomes. So they require a higher degree of monitoring. Most of the work on the technical side is the data itself. So you talk about the data in the research environment, and often that data is stagnant. But when you talk about data in the clinical setting, you're talking about low latency data that might be updated every minute. And using a data standard like FHIR is really critical to be able to have low latency data. Then also all the data available in research, make sure that's available on the clinical side, might require a lot of engineering work. If you look on the upper right-hand side, you're saying, just because you deployed it clinically does not mean clinicians are going to use it. You really need to make sure that you've done all the behavioral sciences needed. You've got the workflow usability and you have the leadership support to be able to make value and truly get that tool into the hands of the clinicians and in a ways that's going to help them save time and be more productive. And so this is where it's not just a technical challenge, it's also understanding the people, processes, and policies that are really different in the clinical care setting than are in the research setting.
Yep. Parsa, do you have anything you want to add to that with your experiences at Montefiore? I know you really
I have some perspective I can share. And thank you, Paul, for demonstrating the complexity of adopting AI-based interventions in care. It's just not as simple as somebody developing a model in vitro, creating a performance, which is essentially a big body of evidence that currently exists about AI. They're all in vitro validations of the robustness performance metrics, but they don't really reflect on the complexity of its adoption in learning health system. And from that perspective, I think we should change our perspective of AI as a tool to AI as an intervention and adopt more formal methods of implementation science and implementation research that is actually designed to capture this complexity in the real world setting of a healthcare system, to validate and evaluate AI and measure its impact as it plays out in the healthcare system. Remember, when we build AI tools and apply AI tools, it's not just the tool itself. We actually change the way clinicians behave in their environment. We change the interaction between patients and clinician, which means we are changing the experiences of our patients. There are massive workflow change that needs to happen to integrate in a non-destructive way a clinical decision support system that is driven by AI. And who knows what kind of outcome change and disparities and unwanted or unexpected outcomes we are imposing to both patient and clinician experience and the bigger, larger societal and population level experiences that we are mediating by adopting AI. So just one-dimensional ways of measuring performance of these things will not cut it from my perspective. And we need to really, as a community, come together and think about how are we going to really measure the impact of AI by more formal methodologies that looks into all of the contexts that should be looked into. There are micro-level contexts, which is basically directly addressing patient experience and clinician experience and interaction between them. There are meso-level experiences or context that needs to be looked into, which is the community population level experiences, all of those conversations that we're having about potential bias and disparities that will happen, access to care and so forth, as well as the health system optimizations, health system experiences that needs to be captured, and then broader societal and the domain level experiences in terms of what it means for the privacy of the patients, what are the ethical and compliance and regulatory aspects of adopting AI and so forth. So that's essentially how I see the field should look into going from conceptualizing AI technology in healthcare and adopting it at large scale to derive care.
Yeah,
So
if I could, just to make one
Sure.
additional comment on top of what Paul and Parsa have said, because what I said earlier about how we can take generative AI into practice really builds on the diagram that Paul showed you and what Parsa is just saying. And what we do for the cases where we can do this, we've been building these, what I call the Clinical Application Collaborative, which is this team of stakeholders and people involved. So it's what Paul had there, but it also includes what Parsa just mentioned, the patient and the patient experience. So all of that is part of what we do when we build out an AI application and we put it into practice. But we formalize it, as we're just talking about, through these collaboratives, these clinical application collaboratives that enable us to bring that technology to bear in a way that actually makes a difference in the clinical outcomes and in the patient care. And that's the kind of thing we can do. Now, that's an expensive, time-consuming thing, but it's important if we're going to do these things right, I would argue.
So I'm going to move on to the last question here. So for those of you in the audience, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat and we'll try to get a bonus question in at the end. What we were just talking about is a great transition to this question, which is about AI governance. I think everybody in every health system is talking about AI governance. There are AI systems popping up all over all systems, from sort of ambient dictation to systems that you bought that didn't have AI that now are getting AI, and now you magically have an AI coming in through a vendor, to homegrown solutions. And as health systems begin to integrate all of these things, how are you thinking about responsible governance, and how can a learning health system in particular support AI initiatives in a safe and scalable way? And Parsa, I'm going to kick it off with you, but then I'm going to go straight to you afterwards, Don, to continue the thinking.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I see that we are running out of time. Let's give a quick perspective on what do we mean by AI governance. I think we can really look into the governance from AI governance from two perspectives. There's soft governance, which is essentially looking into aspects of AI, questions about, is it beneficial? Is it ethical? Is it lawful? Is even AI necessary to create the effects that we are interested in? And what about patients' rights and privacy? Those are questions that naturally will require societal and the human process in place to ask and answer those questions. And then there is a hard governance, which is looking into questions such as how robust is this? How understandable and explainable is this model? Is it transparent? Is it safe and unbiased? And how about privacy preservation and security and so forth? This will the hard governance are those aspects of the governance that will require some infrastructure, some technical architecture and setup to be present to cater for these. And the key for, from my perspective, the key for implementing both hard and soft governance in a learning health system context is that it shouldn't really be conceptualized as an afterthought. It's not an external thing that needs to be plugged into AI somehow. But the best way to do it is to really envision it and embed it into the fabric of how do we even think about applying and deploying AI in healthcare rather than an external safeguard. And if we really see AI governance as part and parcel to implementation of AI, it won't be a hurdle. It will be actually a catalyst for safe and scalable adoption of AI and inviting innovation in a space that seems dangerous or risky, or we don't really know what to expect in terms of lack of evidence on potential longer-term impact. Luckily, what I believe and what we've been working at Montefiore is that the learning health system, being a continuous learning cycle, is also a very good template and model for AI governance. And if we really think that way, which is while you're building and implementing the AI implementation, you're creating training, you are preparing all of the implementation science infrastructure to collect and measure impact and outcome. You can also continuously collect data regarding the soft governance and hard governance of AI in terms of its efficacy, its robustness. Look into model validation questions at both model level and decision level as part of the implementation process, and continuously collect all of that data throughout the implementation cycle of AI. Use the same kind of implementation science research that you do to validate AI-based implementation to also promote and create both transparency and implement the AI governance. But this way, I think that you can really create an infrastructure which is not about build it and forget it or deploy it and forget it. It will be continuously collecting its information about its efficacy and outcome, as well as its reliability and safety. And then I think the learning health system cycles can be used to do it. My last point is that we talked about learning health systems and learning health system of systems, how collaboratively healthcare systems can generate evidence and collaborate and disseminate information about efficacy of clinical interventions, create new knowledge continuously. I think that the same framework of health systems collaborating with each other as a system of systems approach for AI governance as well. At the same way that we think about federated learning to develop AI models that are more generalizable and more reproducible, we can also think about federated AI validation. So we have a much better and much more robust understanding of how AI impacts multiple communities in different contexts and in different settings.
That's great. Don, you got anything to add? And I have one question that came in that I'm going to pose to you afterwards. Paul.
Yeah, just I'll try and be quick on this, given that you've got an additional question. But I would say that my answer to this is operational. We've operationalized the idea of governance, in this case, by forming an AI governance committee. This committee is, in fact, consisting of clinicians, data scientists, ethicists, legal experts, and patient advocates. I want to emphasize, as I did before, the patient advocacy part of it. This oversees the entire AI lifecycle, as Parsa has just said. It's a hard and soft, but we look from procurement to validation, deployment, decommissioning. Although we've not decommissioned any yet, we're looking to those kind of issues as part of the committee and ensuring the alignment with clinical goals, ethical standards, and patient care. This is the kind of thing the committee's got to do operationally to make this possible. The other thing the committee looks at is a tiered maturity model. This allows us to consider actionable pathways based upon what we have organizationally as resources to implement these kinds of solutions. And I guess that I'll say that, just to reemphasize maybe what Parsa said, a big part of the governance strategy that we have is for learning health systems, as he indicated, is this continuous monitoring and validation. Those are keys to learning health systems. Those are keys to AI governance for learning health systems. And I think that's absolutely a part of what we do. And maybe one final comment is that we obviously employ the FAIR principles in everything we do: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable for data set management, for AI, as we do for other informatics kinds of processes. So I'll leave it at that.
All right.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize on what Don just said, that stakeholder engagement. I think it is key to understand that from our perspective, AI governance is a shared responsibility of all stakeholders and participants in care. Patients, communities of patients, patient advocacy is really important. I really appreciate Don bringing it up. And we really look into AI as a co-production. It's not just data science team that drops a technology in the mix. It is everybody participating, bringing their take on how AI models should be trained, what data should be used, how it should be validated, how it should be implemented, monitored, and communicated. The transparency and communication around what it is supposed to be doing, what it is actually doing, and how we ascertain its safety are things that should be clearly stated in understandable language to the patients and to the practitioners that are using these models.
So, Paul, if you want to add something, but I'm going to ask you another question, you can do both. The question that came in was really about portabilities. You're all doing your own things in your own institutions, and you've all talked about federated system, federated learning from one another. To do all of that, you need some kind of common data model. And I'm asking you this, Paul, because you're so involved in the Odyssey community. The question is, what is the right common data model for all of this? And I'm adding to it myself. If it's OMOP, which, if you're a researcher in real world evidence, you're going to know a lot about. And if you're in any other area, you may not know anything about. It's continually surprising to me how many people do not know anything about OMOP. If it's OMOP, do we all need to have our own OMOP CDMs, common data models? Is there a common data model that everyone's going to use? Is it going to be OMOP? Is that the secret to portability? What are your thoughts, Paul?
So I think, we're seeing, so one of the challenges we know is it's hard to create evidence in one data center, in one health system. We know that there's lots of bias, the types of patients that come, the types of procedures that those physicians choose to do for those patients based on the indications that they have. So there's actually a lot of variation that's very specific to a site. And so what happens is, especially when it comes to deep learning, when you're talking about millions of variables, is that these algorithms train to the site before they train to the disease. This is a huge problem in deep learning and machine learning and Gen AI, in that we find that whenever an algorithm is built within an institution and then we take it outside that institution, we have a massive performance drop. And so the FDA today only accepts applications where the data came from at least 4 sites. So the way we address that issue is trying to do heterogeneous data collection so that you incorporate the data from multiple institutions. And so there's different ways of doing that. There's one of the ways of doing that is working directly with the vendors. There's groups like Cerner and Epic have their own data networks that are proprietary within their systems that are just based on their internal data models. The OMOP one is probably one of the leading open data models, which is a simple representation of the EHR using coded data. And that way, one of the things that the benefits of doing that is that we can now exchange code instead of changing data and enable federated learning without exchanging any patient data and providing any patient privacy risks. So that's really been what we've seen with the Odyssey community, which now has over 1 billion medical records represented in the OMOP model across 70 countries and across 560 different health systems and sites. And so OMOP has become really a nice demonstration of how to do open science, and not only that, the protocols are published online as they do a network study. The lead site gets an IRB, and that way even the protocol is presented before we get into the data analysis phase to avoid p-hacking. So it does represent a very nice reproducible model for doing generalizable evidence creation across multiple sites and across multiple types of systems across different countries. We've seen large studies with over 100 million patients being involved. And this is really a new kind of science where we're really showing the value of this compared to very small, very specific randomized controlled trials that are very expensive, take a long time, and actually can become very narrow and have their own biases for patient selection as well. So this has been an incredible complement to evidence generation for RCTs and a way for us to really look at the scale of science. And so I do think OMOP is a great tool. The challenge with OMOP is it covers Medicaid or covers claims and EHR data. There's also a lot of efforts that want to go beyond OMOP. And so OMOP is a good base, but for precision medicine, we want to go deeper. And so there's always going to be new data sets we want to do. So I encourage folks to look at things like OMOP to OBO or all kinds of, there's different ontologies that we use when we get into more basic research that we'd want to be able to extend a open common data model with.
I was going to end, Parsa, we're right at the top of the hour. You've got a short thing you want to say?
One moment.
Yeah.
Just a reflection on the portability question beyond the common data model and infrastructure. I think portability depends on 2 aspects: how the model is developed and how the model is validated. And the best way to ascertain both of them is to do federated and larger scale learning health system of systems approach, where build a model in a much larger communities, multiple health systems, and validate it over time on larger scale across multiple systems. And that's why we can ascertain generality as well as portability of the models, so which will look into more multimodal data sets from multiple populations.
So look, Paul, Don, Parsa, thank you so much. We've started with, disaster is upon us in terms of funding and what's going on. We've talked about the amazing opportunities there are with AI in front of us and some very concrete examples and of what's rolling out, how we can roll out, how we can work together. Super exciting future. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Be well.